We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time of night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time of night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one cries, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know, we gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere, make no mistake. Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, daytime or night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one.
Thank you, honorable members. Please be seated. Honorable members, just a few quick announcements before we call on the next speaker. I do have an issue with persons switching from addressing the speaker to taking on the hecklers. So when you switch from speaking to the speaker, which is what is called for in the standing orders, then you move towards calling the other side you and them, which breaks the parliamentary protocol. And then sometimes when you say you, they kill, you kill, I get included, right? So let's see if we can change. And I think a good example yesterday was the Honorable Member of Ms. Finance, who used the name of an organization and called they and you and everything. So let's look at that because I don't want to keep interrupting. Keep interrupting throws the speakers off balance, and that is why I designed these. This 5 minutes is when you have 5 minutes in your original presentation left. When I show you this, it's 2 minutes. And when I show you this one, is the last minute, even when you got the extension. Because I didn't want to interrupt you to throw you off. So if you speak to me and you keep now and then looking in my direction, you will get these messages without an audio interruption. That being said, we want to also again look at the issue of the amount of other voices and noises in the assembly. Our court reports, our assembly reporters, who is just over the Honorable Member Miss Brown Hastings Williams back, they record and do the transcription in 50-minute segments. So each one of them would get 15 minutes assigned to them. And they take the audio feed off. What happens is it becomes very difficult for them to hear the presenter. We hear good in here, but they find it difficult now to transcribe what they're hearing because of the amount of noise. That being said, I think we've had a great morning so far, and to continue in that tradition, I call on the Honorable Former Minister and Honorable Member, Mr. Hemraj Rajkumar, to make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to share my views on Budget 2021. Mr. Speaker, I have read the budget speech presented by the Honorable Minister to this Honorable House on the 12th of February 2021. The Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh, Senior Minister in the Office of the President, with responsibility for finance, under the theme, A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism, and Resilience. Mr. Speaker, this speech is filled with PPP political rhetoric and half-truths. The budget does not have anything substantial for the ordinary citizen. It is disappointing and deceptive. As I read the few pages of the speech, I became alarmed, Mr. Speaker, with the words of the Honorable Minister at paragraph 1.6 of his speech. I came across these words, and I quote, "Tragically, these gains were sharply reversed during the third phase between 2015 and 2020, a period of renewed state domination, rapid economic regression, and degeneration, made worse towards the end by the devastating effects of COVID-19, and returning the country in a short space of 5 years back to the brink of bankruptcy and deep economic despair." And at paragraph 1.10, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister continued, "Given the depletion and plunder of the public treasury over the past 5 years, Mr. Speaker, this is a misrepresentation of the coalition hard work in our term in office." Mr. Speaker, I said to myself that the Honorable Minister must be suffering from amnesia, But then I realized that the Honorable Minister between 2015 and 2020 was not in Guyana and probably did not take time to familiarize himself with the developments that took place during the period under the APNU plus AFC coalition government. Let me remind the citizens of our country and the Honorable Minister that our country has seen unprecedented infrastructural development between 2015 and 2020. Let's not forget, Mr. Speaker, that in 2019, NASDAQ and IMF would have rated our economy as one of the fastest growing economies in the world. This, Mr. Speaker, was under the APNU plus AFC coalition government, a record which we are proud of. What is more confusing, Mr. Speaker? If it is true that the PPP government had inherited an economy that was almost bankrupt, as they claim, the Guyanese people would like to know, how was it possible that after a few weeks in office, the government was able to provide $7 billion for the COVID-19 cash grant, $2 billion to public sector employees, $1 billion to frontline health workers and the discipline service. Mr. Speaker, this meant that the rhetoric of inheriting an empty treasury could not be true. At paragraph 1.15, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister stated, and I quote, "With the objectives in mind, this budget ensured we recover as a country from 2020 and from the last 5 years of trauma." The last 5 years of trauma, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, someone should have informed the Honorable Minister that in his absence from Guyana, under the APNE plus AFC coalition, the Guyanese workers would have enjoyed continuous raise in their wages and salaries. Public servants' wages and salaries increased from $39,500 in 2015 to $70,000 in 2019. Pension was raised from $13,100 in 2015 to $20,500 in 2019. Income tax threshold was raised, resulting in the workers having more money in their pockets. The APNU plus AFC coalition government would have reduced the burdensome value-added tax that was imposed by the caring PP government from 16% to 14%. We would have created jobs for our citizens, and the list goes on. These, Mr. Speaker, are some of the things that the APNU plus AFC coalition government did to provide a good life for our citizens over the last 5 years. The effort by the coalition to make our people happy cannot be swept under the carpet by these absurd falsities. You cannot throw dust in the eyes of our people. We know, you know, and the people know the achievements of the APNE plus AFC coalition government. Mr. Speaker, since the 2nd of August, 2020, our citizens has been traumatized by the actions of this government. Over 1,000 persons lost their jobs. Persons are being marginalized and victimized. Public servants are afraid to speak out. People are fearful. We are only just 6 months in this new government terms of office. This, Mr. Speaker, is what we call trauma. Mr. Speaker, the falsities and deception continue at paragraph 4.34 of the speech. The Honorable Minister, referring to the agriculture sector under the APNE plus AFD government, said this, and I quote, "Over the past 5 years, the agriculture sector suffered callous neglect, being left to complete decay, as if the intention was to consign it into complete non-existence." This, again, Mr. Speaker, is another political rhetoric from the PP government, and is quite far from the truth. Mr. Speaker, it seems that truth has lost its way within the walls of this assembly. Mr. Speaker, let me put the record straight. During our tenure in office, the APNE plus AFC government would have installed drainage pumps in Essequibo and other parts of the country to assist farmers with flooding. We would have upgraded the farm-to-market roads. We We did extensive work in cleaning and desilting trenches and canals all across the country, providing proper and suitable environment for our farmers. We found a new market for our rice exports, Mr. Speaker. We removed the custom duty and VAT on pesticides used in agriculture, among other things. Mr. Speaker, according to the Honorable Minister, in 2020, the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sector would have grown by 4.1%. The rice growing sector expanded by 4.8%. Mr. Speaker, bear in mind, government would have changed hands in August 2020. The increase observed by the Honorable Minister must have been the result of the hard work of the APNU plus AFC coalition government during its term in the office. Mr. Speaker, the APNU plus AFC coalition government has done an excellent job in developing all sectors of our economy over the last 5 years. Mr. Speaker, as soon as the APNU plus AFC coalition government took office in 2015, we recognized that tourism played an important role in our country's development. We implemented policies and programs, invested in and successfully marketed Guyana as a tourist destination. By 2018, we were able to receive over 286,000 visitors, contributing approximately 62.6 billion to our economy, making tourism the second largest export sector. By 2019, we received over 300,000 visitors, contributing significantly to our economy. Hotspots were identified in various regions for development through our regional tourism committee. In our efforts to develop tourism in all our local regions. Mr. Speaker, the tourism sector is mainly private sector driven. It has suffered tremendous loss during the time of COVID-19. The recovery of this important sector should not be left solely on the tourism stakeholders. Government must collaborate with the current stakeholders to formulate an effective tourism recovery plan so the industry can recover and expand. But sadly, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2020 has no such considerations. Mr. Speaker, I now take the opportunity to respond to the Honorable Ministers, Walron and Rodriguez, with relation to their comments about the Small Business Amendment Bill 2020. We on this side of the House recognize the amendments are necessary. We know the benefits the small business will receive on the passage of this bill. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister did not mention to this House that the exact bill was tabled in this House in 2019. And all she had to do, Mr. Speaker, to this bill was to change the date and her signature on the bill. Every word, every paragraph, every clause represents our ideas. In short, Mr. Speaker, the Small Business Amendment Bill is an AFC plus APNU coalition bill. And yes, Mr. Speaker, I did went to Barbies and launched the Belvedere Business Incubator. The act of launching is distinct from the act of commissioning. It's a difference. The equipment and facilities were procured and paid for in 2019 by the coalition government. However, because of the pandemic, its shipping was delayed. I'm happy to hear that the equipment has arrived and has been installed. I know that the small entrepreneurs in Barbies are grateful to the APNE plus AFC coalition government for its effort in providing such a facility to help them develop their business. But the question, Mr. Speaker, if this facility has all the equipment and has electricity and power attached to it, why is it not being open to the public? Why is it has not been open to the public for their use, Mr. Speaker? Are we waiting for the commissioning? Mr. Speaker, there's nothing spectacular or exciting about Budget 2021. It is another disappointing and deceptive budget. It has nothing for the new, there's nothing new, and there's nothing substantial for the ordinary man. Mr. Speaker, the increase in pension was promised in 2020. It is nothing new, and it is a far cry from the promise during the elections campaign. The school children grant was promised in 2020, and again, nothing new. The question to ask, however, is the cash grant adequate to keep our vulnerable students in school? The answer, we all know the answer to this question, Mr. Speaker. I expect that in this time of COVID-19, in addition to the cash grant, government would have considered giving a tablet, to those vulnerable children, especially those in the hinterland, who are required to attend school virtually, and to provide free data to all students, and by setting up more ICT hubs around the country and ensure that they are in working order. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that the government will be executing the Abramsville Secondary School reconstruction project, a project conceived by the APNU plus AFC government and was catered for in the 2018 budget and tendered in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the National Quality Infrastructure and the Electronic Single Window are projects initiated by the APNU plus AFC government with the objective of enhancing quality and ease of doing business in Guyana. There's nothing new, Mr. Speaker. It's another APNU plus AFC project. Mr. Speaker, our public servants and university students are disappointed. Our public servants are disappointed because over the past years, at budget time, they expect, and the coalition government always provide, an increase in salaries. They also receive retroactive pay and benefit from the increase in income tax threshold. The combined effect is providing more money in the hands of our workers. They were happy, Mr. Speaker. Today, Mr. Speaker, there is no such announcement made about any public servant wage increase. No announcement about retroactive pay, and of course, the income tax threshold remained the same as 2019. Two consecutive budgets by the PVP, no wage increase for our public servants. Our hard-working public servants are left to wonder. They are left to wonder that what percentage of salary increase they will have in 2021, if any at all. But however, Mr. Speaker, that is indeed there is an allocation in the budget for the increase in wage and salaries, there's nothing preventing the Honorable Minister from making this announcement in his closing speech. There's nothing preventing him to announce a 10% increase in wages and salaries, retroactive from January 2020, and raising the income tax threshold. There will be no doubt, once again, that this will no doubt once again bring smiles to the faces of our hard-working teachers, policemen, soldiers, nurses, doctors, and other public service workers. Mr. Speaker, our university students are wondering too. They are wondering when will this government make good its campaign promise of free education. Nothing has been spoken about free education in this budget. Not even a plan for incremental reduction of fees. This is another promise. Is this another promise broken by the government, or is it a pink slip? Mr. Speaker, what the tariff has been
Honorable
reduced.
member, you will have to get 5 more minutes to continue.
Thank you. Comrade Speaker, I do move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude this presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker.
Jones, Mr. Hemraj, you may.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we heard this morning of what the tariff being reduced. What the tariff will be reduced by an impressive 5%, please, Your Honor. Giving households that consume an average of $200 per month a saving of $100. More money in the pockets of their parents to buy sweets for them for the month, please, Your Worship. The small man will now be able to purchase imported stone, locally produced pre-stressed concrete piles, and locally fabricated mild steel beams for the construction of his home free from VAT. Is this measure designed to assist the small man in constructing the home? How many ordinary persons use and can afford pre-stressed concrete piles, mild steel beams for the construction of their homes? What about our local materials, such as stone, boards, nail, plywood, window, and doors? These are things we, the small man, use to build our house, Mr. Speaker. Should these not be zero-rated as well? Mr. Speaker, I have listened to the arguments presented in support of Budget 2020-21, and I realize that this budget of $383.1 billion depends heavily on borrowing to execute the plan. While I support development in our country, I do not support development at the cost of borrowing and placing a burden on our citizens for generations to come. I am not convinced that this budget is right for our people in its entirety, and I will not support the passage at its present form. But before I take my seat, please, Your Honor, I would like I wish to state that we on this side of the House is resolute in our stand against the claim of our Essequibo by Venezuela. Our message is, Essequibo is ours, Essequibo is we own. And we repeat the words of Dave Martin: we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now have the honor to call on the Honorable Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports, the Honorable Member Charles Ramsey. Honorable Minister, you may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, it's a very great pleasure to stand here before you as an elected member and support the largest budget ever presented in this country's history. And I'm also very pleased to stand here as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport to also say that this is the largest budget for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport in this country's history. And I'm also pleased, I have to say as well, to hear the honorable member of the other side who spoke a moment ago, to actually hear his voice. From the last parliament, I did not hear his voice one time. One time. Mr. Speaker, I have listened to members from the APNU AFC who are attempting to criticize this budget and the People's Progressive Party government. And I ask myself, who are these people who have proven that they cannot even run a pig pen and now claim that they can be a better government? And I've said to the honorable member of the other side, don't get personal with me. I've said that to all of them, don't get personal with me. All know the pigs from the sled fund can't be found. All know. Where is the piggy, Figgy? Where is the piggy? You just came out of power. You had your chance to run this country. You spent $1.4 trillion of taxpayers' money. When you came, you found Guyana in 2015 with $10 billion in surplus in the central bank. You left it with $92 billion in overdraft. You found $20 billion of gold reserves. It is now decreased to $500 million. The current account deficit is now is 1.8 billion US dollars when you left office. All of that money was spent, and your marquee projects that you have completed was an overpass, a roundabout, and $1.6 billion on the Durban Park project. And $600 million of that money can't be found. Can't be found. APNU AFC, they promised jobs. We lost over 30,000 jobs. And the president of the country, when asked about what is his job creation plan, he told Guyana to go and sell cook up rice, pepper sauce, and plantain chips. They promised young people would occupy the position of government. And they ended up with a government of geriatrics. People like James Bond and Trevor Williams and Malika Ramsey, up to today, They can't find their voices. They can't recover. They promised to reduce taxes and raise taxes on everything. Even the small man got pressured. Put VAT on electricity, put VAT on telephone, put VAT on data. Even love became more expensive. You can't even get more love in the country. Even the donkey cart wasn't spared the wrath of the tax whip. They promised free education. David Granger himself in 2015 promised free education, and in the 5 years, they raised tuition fees by 35%. Put VAT on electricity. The president of the country, His Excellency Dr. Irfan Ali, said that there will be free university education by 2024. They promised transparency and accountability, and they hid the $18 million US signature bonus and lied about it. Promised adherence to the rule of law.
Honorable Minister, and they lied about it. I think the lying word is the wrong word. And then the other issue is addressing the chair.
They ducked it. How about that? They promised the adherence of the rule of law, and the invisible president breached the Constitution multiple times. And it's not me say so. It's there's this Caribbean Court of Justice that says so. And I got the extract, and I'm laying all of these documents that I have here over with the Parliament at the end of my speech. It says here in the GCOM Patterson case, it says in the final paragraph, final sentence on the first paragraph, and the references 2019 CCJ 13 AJ. It says in this, the GCOM chairman case, in quotations, the court concluded that the process that resulted in the unilateral appointment by the president of a chairman of GCOM was flawed and in breach of the Constitution. The first time in the history of this country that a court ruled that this president, that a sitting president, breached our Constitution. And then they try to insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people by telling us that 33 is not a majority of 65. Embarrass the country, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, embarrass the country to take the case to the CCJ. And we took, this is the extract from the case. It says here at the caption, what is the majority necessary for the passage of a no confidence motion? The sentence says, one does not have to study law to appreciate that the word majority means the greater of two parts. APNU told this country that they had changed their ways. They had changed their names. They first, from PNC, they changed to PNC One Guyana, then to One Guyana, then to Reform, then to One Guyana Reform.
Mr. Speaker,
up to now.
Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 40A, 41.1 says that the member shall confine his and her observation to the subject on the discussion.
Okay, honorable member,
on the budget.
you stand on a point of order and you wait to be acknowledged. You don't be like a runaway train.
Sorry, sir. My
right?
apologies.
So you're standing on 41. What is the point of order?
41.1. A member shall confine his or her observations to the subject under discussion. I don't think that is what the honourable member is speaking about.
Honourable member, I don't uphold that as a point of order. We will have to do some more lessons. Honourable Minister, please continue.
Apparently she wasn't listening when you ruled on that already, Mr. Speaker. They told this country that the APNU had changed their ways, changed their clothes, that they don't want to rig the elections, and they tried to rig the elections in front of the entire world and took 5 months to give up power. Recorded in the Guinness Book of World Record, gave Guyana the ignoble embarrassment of being recorded in the Guinness Book of World Record for 5 months to refuse to give up power. And David Granger, I have to say, knew that he was planning to rig the election when he started with the appointment of Justice Patterson, and read the speech that he made, which is recorded in the Demerara Waves on the 5th of November, 2017, the title, Regaining and Retaining Power, Big Questions for the PNCR. It says here, and I quote, this is what he said at the address at the 5th biannual conference of the PNCR's North American region in Atlanta, Georgia. I quote, whatever you will choose to discuss today and the weeks and months to come, I think that there are several questions that you have to ask yourselves as you look to the future. You have to ask yourself, how did the PNC gain office in 1964? Ask yourself, how did the PNC remain in office? And what did you do during that period? Ask yourself, how the PNC gained power in 2015? And ask yourself, how the PNC retained power after 2020? I'm placing all of this here before this Parliament because there must be a record kept by this Honorable House. And imagine that you were the leader of a country and you saw all of that shenanigans going on and all the discord and disquiet happening in this country at the Ashman's building. When I was there, I was present. I saw when they shut down the building, removed the locks from the doors. And all of that happened, and David Granger did not have a care in the world to go to find out what occurred. And on June 14th, 3 months later, when he was doing an interview the day after the CARICOM report was concluded and submitted and presented to this public, he did an interview right in State House where he was asked the question, has he ever seen the statements of polls? 3 months later, the president of the country who realizes that there is problems in relation to what is the actual tabulation and calculation of the statements of polls. And he said 3 months later that he hasn't seen the statements of polls. All he saw was a spreadsheet, and he believed that that spreadsheet was the accurate one. Well, let me tell the honorable member, Ms. Joretta Fernandes, because you brought an issue about our constitutionality and why it is that we are in power. Well, I brought the report from CARICOM, and let me advise what it says, some of the things of what it says, because this is in its executive.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Just for clarity's sake, if you can help me here. I remember you said that matters that are sub judice should not be spoken about. As far as I know, we have 2 petitions that are actually in the court and should not be spoken about in the Parliament.
This is a public report. It's not, the contention is not based on the report. I'm reading a public report.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, remember, as you promised, to lodge all those
All of these I'm lodging, all of these. It says from the outset, the team wishes to acknowledge that the exercise that we observed was not, in fact, a recount. It was an audit of the votes cast on March 2nd, and from the start it was conceived as an audit, notwithstanding the statement on the national recount. A recount of votes means exactly that, a counting of the ballots. In this case, the so-called recount extended to issues normally reserved for the audit of ballots cast. The team did not witness anything which would render the recount and, by extension, the casting of the ballot on March 2nd so grievously deficient procedurally or technically, or sufficiently deficient to have thwarted the will of the people and consequently preventing the election results and its declaration by GCOM and reflecting the will of the voters. The actual count of the vote was indeed transparent. I have another part to mention here, because they spoke about phantom voting The numerous requests for information on serial numbers were so bizarre that on one observed occasion, an APNU AFC agent was prepared to query serial numbers on the OLE in a workstation where no one had voted. These challenges were often made on the grounds of debt and migration. Presumably, therefore, the contention is that the March 2nd polls, the phenomenon of ghost voting occurred, as well as the voter impersonation and other forms of voter fraud. The team viewed much of the exercise as a fishing expedition. In their conclusions, this is what they said: the team categorically rejects the concerted public efforts to discredit the 2020 polls up to the disastrous Region 4 tabulation. Despite our concerns, nothing we witnessed warrants a challenge to the inescapable conclusion that the recount results are acceptable and should constitute the basis of a declaration of the results of the March 2nd, 2020 elections. This is the report. Don't open the doors. Don't open the doors if you don't know where the room will lead. Don't open the doors. This is the executive summary from the CCJ. It says here that the application, you want to talk about the constitutionality of our positions. The ruling of the CCJ said this: the application challenged the credibility of the count by GCOM under Order 60. Ms. Eslyn David requested an interpretation of the phrase "more votes cast" in Article 177(2)(b) of the Constitution, and she asked the court to restrain the CEO from complying with the GCOM chair's direction without GCOM first determining the credibility of the elections under Order 60 and Section 96. Here is what they concluded. They said that unless and until an election court decides otherwise, the votes already counted by the recount process as valid votes are incapable of being declared invalid by any person or authority. By unnecessary insertion of the word valid, the Court of Appeal impliedly invited the CEO to engage unilaterally in an unlawful validation exercise. This trespassed on the exclusive jurisdiction of the High Court established by Article 163. It was inconsistent with the constitutional framework for the CEO or GCOM to disenfranchise thousands of electors in a seemingly non-transparent and arbitrary manner without due process established in Article 163 and the Validation Act. You ask us about our constitutionality. Nothing that you can say can determine constitutionality. You're not even wise enough to understand that there's a separation of powers, that when you have the lawmakers and you have the judiciary to interpret what the law should be, and that is what occurred. You also promised that you would end corruption, and the misleading mantra of boots and boats and bicycles turned out to be bangles, bracelets, and bed sheets. The 400 million drug bond scandal, BK's best friend, Hardat Singh, Bai Shing Ling the jet trip, the land scandals, $1 billion to Sarah. You have members in this honorable house between the period of January 2020 and March 2020 3 months, deposited $90 million in their bank account. $90 million in their bank account, 3 months. And they also transferred $400,000 US to an account in Texas. Everybody was on some kind of hustle. You have somebody, you got fuel smuggling, you got gun license. Everybody was on some kind of hustle. So, and the desperation to retain power degenerated to campaigns at funerals. And then the honorable members of the APNU AFC has the nerve to complain and allege about dead voting. Imagine you took 23 years to get back power, and this is what you did with it. So, for the first time in my life, I'm going to find myself agreeing with the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, when he said that it's not true to say that the APNU AFC did nothing. They did do something. They did a lot of damage to this country. They did a lot of damage to the people of this country. And I also, as I'm on the subject of the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, I heard him also say that he disagrees with the cash injection to Gaisuko. For a man that has an affinity for brown rum, one would expect that he would want to keep the sugar estates open. So you had your 5 years.
Mr. Speaker.
You had your 5 years. Now let the real people
Mr. Speaker,
run its government.
Mr. Speaker, my apologies. The honorable member, Mr. Kemra. The honorable member, Kemra Ramjatan, is trying to get your attention, sir.
Honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, you want to get my attention?
Non-parliamentary about problem.
And the innuendo is quite clear. Ramjatan is involved with broken rum.
Thank you, honorable
what is
member.
that? I mean,
Honorable Minister, you may continue.
When the heart fit, right? When the heart fit, you just draw the string. That's all people say. You just had your 5 years. This is a new government. We've come into office. Let us run our program and let the people of the country be the judge of our records as they were the judge of your records. Go and ask. Already there's strong signs that there's economic recovery. Go and ask the retailers in this country what Christmas was like, and they will tell you that even in a pandemic, this was the best Christmas that they have had in the last 5 years. Money was on the road. Money was on the road. And the honorable member, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Bangles, he said on an interview that this was going to be a very dark Christmas. That is what he said. Turned out to be untrue. And get comfortable, because it will be 30 years before you smell power again. And mark my words on this. We in the People's Progressive Party, we don't gaff. And in politics, this is not a gaffing game. And let me place on record right now, we told you in 2015 that we were coming back for power. And we did so when you controlled the public service, the government, the executive, the police, the army. We did all of that and took power from you. And I'm going to place on record now that we're coming for 3 more seats. And if you continue to behave this way, we're coming for 5. I'm placing it on record now. This is a budget debate. It's supposed to be the examination of a macroeconomic health of the country. And the debate proposed so far by the government for the fiscal year. What is interesting, however, that their economic czar, the man who lost them the election, is still Winston Jordan, the man who thought that the signature bonus was a gift, the man who went into South and said that he used to see John B. when he was a little boy. He said, what we instead had is incoherent and contradictory arguments coming from the other side. One set is saying that the AP and these are AP and UAFC projects, but in the same breath, they said that they don't want to support the budget. One set saying that we should do more for COVID, another set saying that we're borrowing too much. If it is in COVID, where are you getting the money to do more for COVID people who are affected by COVID? No financial and economic analysis. All we had from the AP and UAFC and their obedient, what we have had from the APNU and their obedient lackey is the AFC is an attempt at race baiting rhetoric, which further seals their fate as a group of people who will become extinct like the dodo bird, which they emulate. But despite this inevitable self-destruction, the parliament is a place where there's a record that is kept. There's a Hansard. And in relation, and we're obligated to respond. They said, I want to place on record, as we have done many, many times already, public servants will get a bonus this year. And it is almost never the case that a bonus is announced during the budget speech. Never. And the claim that we're attacking the public service and by extension Afro-Guyanese, assuming that the vast majority of public servants are Afro-Guyanese, is in and of itself requires further elucidation. And history has a way of providing clarity. What I have here is a photocopy of particular sections of the 1992 budget presented by none other than Carl Greenidge. Carl Greenidge presented this budget on the 30th of March, 1992. And in this table at the last, at page 92, page 93, there's a section in the table which does employment and labor. In 1985, the public service had 28,686 persons. By 1991, it went down to 18,361. The PNC fired 10,000 public servants. 10,000 public servants. And it didn't finish there. The PNC, after they nationalized Denver in 1971, they fired the same, when you go by Spiteland, when you go and see that rusty factory which was closed down, they fired 2,000 workers, 40% of their workforce from Denver. And then you have to then come and lecture us about your love for public servants. And furthermore, you destroyed and pauperized the lives of fixed income workers with the economic mismanagement during that period. Pauperized. When the exchange rate moved from 4 to 1 to 124 to 1, in just 6 years, you destroyed their purchasing powers, pauperized public servants in this country. And the fact is that your argument is self-defeating, because if the PPP inherited a public service where Afro-Guyanese dominated the public service in 1992, And when we left in 2015, it was still dominated by Afro-Guyanese. It means that the Afro-Guyanese weren't targeted in the 23 years that we were in office. So there is no question about our position on this. No one will be expected to be targeted by us, excepting the people who would have done financial crimes, who are holding offices, public offices. They have to be held to account. And when you are faced with these kinds of facts, you always return to the dark period in this country, ignoring that under your watch, there wasn't 400 persons who were murdered. There were 700 persons who were murdered in the last 5 years. That is the record. That is the record. By the quote-unquote security experts, 700 murders occurred in the last 5 years. And as it relates to debt, because I know that there's a lot of people talking about debt, the Honorable Member, Ms. Director of Finance, had said that this is the largest level of debt that we've ever had. That is not true. In our country, in 1992, you had an economy that was 300 million US dollars, and our debt was 700% of that. So if your economy was this, the size of your debt was this. And the debt, the size of the debt is not the aggregate that matters, it's the relative position. The relative position. It is the debt relative to your GDP. No amount of shouting can change the facts. No amount of shouting can change the facts. And when you examine our deficit as a percentage of GDP, it is 8.7%. It is 8.7% of our GDP. So don't come and mislead people in this country about what is our debt and what are we being concerned about. We are in a time of crisis too. We are in a time of crisis too. COVID caused, there are a number of issues that occurred in the last 5 years.
Honorable Minister, you are going to be in a time of crisis if you don't get an extension. Honorable Minister Gator Shearer.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes more to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Shearer. Honorable Minister Ramson, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have set, in relation to our ministry, I've set my ministry a mission to develop and showcase young Guyanese talent. And the mission is aggressively advancing and the ministry is aggressively advancing that mission. When I came to the ministry, it wasn't even a ministry. The national voice in government for culture, youth, and sport was kicked into a department within the ministry. It lacked leadership in a major way. It had no vision, no passion, no energy. The organizational structure was weak. Imagine the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, when I got there, had 6,000 likes on Facebook. Today it has over 22,000 likes on Facebook, 25,000 followers. And we will be launching our website in another few weeks as it is in the final stages. And I'm surprised that the ministry was in this state. I'm not surprised because they took their cue from their absent president because he was a sailor. 5 years to complete the Green State strategy, and it cost this country $2 million US, 400 million Guyana dollars, and asked any of them what it means. None of them could tell you what the Green State strategy was, and none of them would be able to tell you that it would have costed this country over $1 trillion to implement. Even more interesting that I said, what is important to note that even in a pandemic, that we are an events-driven ministry. We've already done more in 6 months than the AP and UAFC 3 ministers has done in the last 5 years. And we have tapped into an untapped resource, which we have found that the country wants to be able to build with this government. And I've personally visited and assessed community grounds and started doing work with those grounds in the following. Burnham's Park, New Amsterdam, Albion Sports Complex, Port Morant Community Ground, Chesney Ball Field, Kane Field, Agricola Community Ground, Golden Fleece Ground, Reliance Ground, Lima Ground, Anna Regina Ground, Affiance Ground, Pomona Community Ground, Aurora, Rose Hall, Kanji, Jai Hind, Hampshire, Crabwood Creek, Line Path, number 70, Wim, Buxton Community Ground, Better Hope Community Center, LBI Community Center, Enterprise, Enmore, Linden, Tushen, Metamizorg, Zeeburg, Cornelia Ida, Zealot, Crane, Go Ahead Fortune, Caracara, Spiteland, The Hoop, Fairfield, Mahika Branch Road, Dundee School, Bushlot Ground, Bath Settlement, the Edward Ground, Blairmont number 3, Tiger Bay, GCC, Maltinos, Everest, and DCC. And we haven't even stepped on the gases yet. The majority of these grounds were in terrible shape. There was a ground that we found in Zambia that I took the media to. $20 million was spent, and up to this day, the ground cannot be used. It looks like a jungle. Many of these grounds were assisted already through our ground enhancement program. We've already started to distribute sports gear so that we can get young people starting to play sports again. And when I came into the ministry, they had an entire section of sports gear that was dry rotted. The National Sports Commission, and I heard the honorable member speak about the National Sports Commission. The National Sports Commission was appointed in 2017, and in 2 years, they had 3 meetings. 2 years, they had 3 meetings. They never laid in this parliament. They never had audited statements. They never laid in this parliament, as they're required to do by the act, those statements. They never submitted reports to the previous minister. The entire place was in a disaster. But immediately after here, Mr. President, as we get out of this budget debate, the ministry will be appointing the commission, the sports commission, and we will be making our new appointment to the director of sport. And an investigation will be launched too, Mr. Speaker, because I've seen a number of untoward things occurring there. The tracks, I have to mention the tracks. The only project that was done in the last administration. It started in 2018. They said that it would have been completed in 2019. Then he went back and said that it would have been completed in 2020. It is now 2021 and it's still not completed. But the People's Progressive Party will come and finish your job. And I have to show this country what had occurred during that period of time, because the previous administration requested that they needed a change of color from the track.
Honorable Minister, you will have to conclude.
They changed the color of the track, and in order to change the color of the track, it would have costed this country almost $30 million. And you know what color they wanted to change the track to? Green and yellow. Green and yellow. And this APNU AFC government needs to apologize to this country for attempting to brainwash this country by painting everything green and yellow. Painting everything green and yellow. Mr. Speaker, I will take the additional time outside of this engagement to explain our entire program during our budget estimates, because we have run out of time. But it's very important that we respond to a number of these things that the honorable members have said. And I am very pleased to support the largest budget in Guyana's history and the largest allocation for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Honorable Member, Mr. Vincent Henry, you may proceed with your contribution, sir. The time is running.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Guyana Action Party, a member of the APNU-AFC coalition, the indigenous peoples of Guyana, and the people of Region 9, I bring greetings to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, as a indigenous representative of the people, I wish to express my dismay that I and other representatives were denied our constitutional right of freedom of movement in and out of Parliament on the 11th of February. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member, again, I dealt with that, and if you persist, I will have to get you to apologize.
Mr. Speaker, I do withdraw. I have made my point. Mr. Speaker,
That's how you. That's how you make your point.
I do apologize.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we listened to a rambling presentation by the Honorable Charles Ramsey. When he spoke about almost everything else but his ministry's program, policies, and we learned from him that his achievements were something to do with sports grounds, and he may best be described as the Honorable Sports Grounds Minister. Mr. Speaker, we, the indigenous people of Guyana, stand firmly with all Guyanese in saying to Venezuela and the world that Essequibo is ours. It is not for sale, nor is it for anyone to use as a bargaining chip for personal political power. We take this opportunity to thank President Granger for his astute leadership in using various acceptable strategies to counteract this unjust threat by Venezuela. We ask that the current PPP government learn from him and the APNU-AFC and work towards safeguarding Guyana. The people of Region 9 are listening, and they would like to know that they are safe. So, learn from APNU-AFC. Mr. Speaker, as a recognition of the first peoples who settled and remained in Guyana, I ask that we remember the contributions made by the Honorable Stephen Campbell, the first indigenous person who became a parliamentarian. We request that the day he entered Parliament, the 10th of September, be declared a national holiday. And why is not the government side clapping to that? The indigenous people of Region 9 are listening, and they have heard that you have not clapped. You have not clapped on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, you may guide me.
Honorable,
but we further.
Honorable member, I couldn't clap.
My apologies again.
So if you speak to me, we can get it right.
Mr. Speaker, and again, you may guide me, but we further demand that the foreboding cloud of injustice be blown away and allow a fitting closure and justice for the Henry and Sings boys' murder. Mr. Speaker, the PPP as a political party is well known for making promises that it has no intention of honoring. In 2011, it promised the indigenous Tushals attending the National Tushals Council's conference that it would institute learning channels in every indigenous community. To date, the PPP has not fulfilled this promise. It also promised the indigenous community that they would have internet access in all communities by 2013. After squandering over $1 billion on a fiber optic project, the much-touted dream of lightning speed internet to Region 9 disintegrated into lightning speed Jumbo project. Mr. Speaker, the PPP promised Guyanese $50,000 per child. They now plan to give a measly $15,000. The PPP promised the pensioners of Guyana $40,000 per month, but never delivered. They have instead used subterfuge to fool the seniors of Guyana who were expecting a $5,000 increase in 2020 and another $5,000 in 2021. The PPP promised the Tushals an increase in their stipends. They also promised to pay village councillors monthly stipends. Mr. Speaker, according to the WAPI channels of South Rupununi, the PPP is a Kuride government. They are Mahjong Kuride. It is a shame to see the depths that the PPP would go to deceive the indigenous peoples. According to a lady in Iowa, Central Rupununi, the acronym PPP continues to be proven to stand for punishing poor people. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs continues to be an anti-indigenous organization. Starting from the name Amerindian, that is made up of two parts, namely Amur, from the name Amerigo Vespucci, a conquistador who raped, killed, and enslaved our ancestors, and the other part Indian, that is a misnomer coined by Columbus, who got lost and mistakenly took our ancestors to be Indians in India. Mr. Speaker, no right-thinking indigenous person or persons would allow themselves to be associated with the name Amerindian. Perhaps only the Honorable Minister of Amerindian Affairs, who stubbornly keeps doing this. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to minimize the massive developments that took place in the hinterland in just a few years under the APNU AFC, the PPP has made many steps backwards. Instead of building on the solid foundation instituted and known as the HAYES program that has proven to be sustainable and of great benefits to our hinterland youths, the obtuse PPP has started the ill-conceived CSO program that has only one objective, and that is to buy indigenous votes. This CSO program seems to be locked in stillbirth. Only yesterday, a senior villager called me to express dissatisfaction with the way the CSO program is being managed in her community. The hinterland youths are clamoring for a return of the HAYES program that has training and a business development component. However, we cannot expect better from an obtuse Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. Mr. Speaker, at one meeting, the current Honorable Minister of Amerindian Affairs was asked by an indigenous young lady to include a training component in the CSO program. Her answer was that if the youth was not satisfied with the CSO program, then she should leave it. What a shame. Mr. Speaker, quite recently, a youth in Cato asked a question related to land titling and demarcations in indigenous communities, only to be reprimanded and told that he was too young to understand issues of development. One continues to ask the question, where did the PPP find such an honorable official? One can safely conclude that the PPP is certainly not supportive of our hinterland youth. Mr. Speaker, I have heard misinformation from the other side related to the termination of the CSO program in March 2015. Please allow me to give the facts on this issue. Indeed, the check to pay the CSOs were canceled in that same March 2015. Indeed, there was a cabinet paper directing that the CSO program be terminated or squashed, whatever word you want to use. However, Mr. Speaker, The cabinet that instructed the then PS acting to end the CSO program was the PPP cabinet. It was the PPP who fired the CSOs. Mr. Speaker, I repeat because I want Region 9 to hear, Region 1, Region 8, Region 7. It was the PPP that fired the CSOs. And now they come to us as sanctimonious, I wouldn't call the other word. However, Mr. Speaker, it was also the coalition that found the monies to pay the CSOs for March 2015 and also invited those CSOs to join the new and far better Hayes program. Mr. Speaker, however, it is time for the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs to also target the training of qualified indigenous youth to get jobs, training and jobs in the oil and gas industry. It is also time to activate the Green Center, or the first technical institute in the hinterland that is based at the Bina Hill Institute. Further, Mr. Speaker, a committee was assigned to conduct an investigation into alleged misconduct by the Village Council of Campbelltown, whose Tushao happened to be a female member of the National Tushao's Council, well known for speaking her mind on issues. The fairness of this committee immediately came into question because the chairman of the committee that was appointed by the minister happened to be a PPP activist. Mr. Chairman, as expected, the events culminated with the Tushao being fired. Shame, how do you treat our indigenous women leaders like that? I have been informed also that PPP activists have been bullying independent thinking contenders for Tushaoship in many indigenous communities. I demand that the indigenous peoples be allowed to elect the leaders of their own choice. Further, there must be non-interference in the National Tushao's Council's elections. Mr. Speaker, since its installed, the PPP became the government of Guyana, we have seen meritocracy thrown out the window. Many qualified and conscientious workers have been fired because they are perceived to be supporters of the APNU-AFC. In Region 9, most of the community development officers and welfare officers were fired. My poor Amerindian brothers and sisters. Mr. Speaker, as human beings, we eat, drink, and breathe to survive. It is sad to witness the level that the PPP has descended. They have sought to paint a picture that only they are deserving of having meals at the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, it is not only the meals in the National Assembly that the PPP wants for themselves. It is becoming glaring that the PPP feels that only they should enjoy the national patrimony, inclusive of jobs, contracts, and services. Mr. Speaker, the PPP preaches one Guyana, but what they really mean is one Guyana only for the PPP. Mr. Speaker, during the APNU-AFC's recent period in government, there have been monumental developments benefiting all Guyanese, including the people of the hinterland. Establishment of townships in key hinterland regional capitals have jump-start developments benefiting the local population. Lethem is an example. For 23 years under the PPP, the people of Lethem inhaled red dust in the heart of the town. It was the coalition that brought relief to the residents by building a bitumen road that experts say would last a lifetime. Instead of the PPP's wooden bridges, the coalition constructed concrete bridges at Manari and other strategic areas. Potable water supply systems have been established in villages in Region 9, whether or not the villages voted for APNO-AFC. Local technicians were trained and paid to ensure that the systems are functional. These technicians enjoy a salary of over $70,000 per month, and it did not matter whom they voted for. What mattered were that they were capable and had the will to work for the development of their communities. Now we are seeing something totally different happening in this wonderful country of Guyana. Oh dear. General developments. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to summarize some of the developments that have made positive impacts on the lives of the people of the hinterland. We have radio stations in strategic areas, including Wawriala, Mabaruma, Lethem, and Shalton. Right now, I have received messages via Wi-Fi from across the region that they're listening to this presentation here. I hail you, the people of Region 9, and I can tell you that the Wi-Fi that you have there was first conceptualized and granted under the APNU AFC government. Increasing old age pensions from 13,000 to 25,500, increasing of public servant salaries, training of over 2,000 hinterland youths in many life skills, including leadership, tourism, entrepreneurship, and facilitating our young people in their business endeavors. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, APNU AFC also achieved massive developments in Region 9 via the SLED program. These include 2 tourist guest houses
Honorable
in Toka.
Member, via the extension, you can continue. Honorable Mr. Jones.
Comrade Speaker, I do move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Member Mr. Jones. Honorable Member Mr. Henry, you may continue to conclude.
Please, only 1 minute, please stop. Mr. Speaker.
I actually did add a minute onto your original time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, APNU AFC also achieved massive developments in Region 9 via the SLED program. These include 2 tourist guest houses in Toka, a canter, water supply system in Coral in Kaikombe, a modern tourist guest house in Quarry, a training center in Haiwa, and other projects in Shulinab, Tarinau, Suwariwa, Cardanawa, Marunau, Parishara, Cardanawa, Katoka, amounting to nearly $175 million. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to underline that for these villages to get the projects, they had to apply to the Ministry of Social Protection. And after approval, an engineer visited the region and assessed the cost of the various projects while helping to improve the plans. This was followed by the awarding of the contracts by the Regional Tender Board before implementation commenced. Mr. Speaker, we heard the Honorable Dharm Madlal accusing me of somehow mismanaging this project. Mr. Speaker, at no time was I the project manager, nor was I a member of the evaluation board for granting of the project approvals, nor was I ever in charge of the implementation of the project. My interventions as a CDO was to assist the various beneficiaries whenever they needed assistance. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to thank the Honorable Dharm Madlal for making me to be $155 million richer. I have begun to wonder why he is so preoccupied with trying to make the nation see me as a person like himself. I also wonder if this is happening because villages in Region 9 are astonished at his extracurricular activities whenever he goes to Region 9. Or is it because of the Guyanese folks saying that thief man never like see next man walk with bag? Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, you might be impugning this, so be careful how you proceed along that line.
Thank you. He did, but the Honorable Member did not impute when he accused me wrongfully before. Mr. Speaker, I have noticed a big fanfare to distribute COVID grants to villages. Information coming from the region is that the grants were not allocated fairly. 2 villages that voted overwhelmingly for APNU AFC were granted smaller budgets than lesser populated villages who voted for the PPP. Mr. Speaker, the one-off 25,000 cash grants given to households cannot be the solution to counteracting the negative effects of the COVID pandemic. The people of Guyana deserve better. The people of the hinterland deserve better. Currently, there is a massive outbreak of COVID in Roraima, Brazil. Mr. Speaker, I want to propose that in the future, that we do like what is happening around the world and give proper help to the communities. at least 25,000 per month until the pandemic subsides. Mr. Speaker, there was recently a flurry of activities by the Ministry of Natural Resources to facilitate the access to the Moridi Mountains in the South Rupununi by a PPP cabal who sought to monopolize the exploitation of gold in that location. It must be noted that this activity would have been done without the involvement and actually being beneficial to the small miners who are included by the Amerindians of South Rupununi. Mr. Speaker, luckily for the small miners, the South Rupununi District Council, the only legal district council in Guyana made possible by the APNU-AFC and the Rupununi Miners Association, stood their ground and fought tooth and nails for the small and the indigenous miners. However, the miners are asking that we bring back and you bring back the mediation agreement that was previously made, the one that they themselves are calling the Raphael Trotman's mediation agreement, because that is one that can settle the complex Moridi Mountains mining issues while respecting the indigenous peoples and their social and environmental issues. Mr. Speaker, on Examine, a study done by Carlos Camacho Hazard, December 2016, page 22, entitled Midterm Evaluation of the Amerindian Land Titling in Guyana, I saw the following figures related to our land title in Guyana. Between 1974 and 2013, some 11,992.33 square miles of land were titled. Of this, 4,270.63 square miles were granted by the PPP, and 7,721.7 were granted by the PNC. From these figures, you can see that the PNC cared more for us indigenous people than the PPP. Since then, APNU-AFC has taken the process forward and granted land titles to Kangaruma, Tasserine, Yupukari, St. Monica, Wednesday, and Waiko. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that the PPP, who had 23 years to settle all our indigenous land issues and grant all indigenous community land titles, had no care in the world to give us what is rightfully ours.
You need to conclude now, honorable member.
Pardon me?
You need to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, our public servants who served us daily were not even mentioned in the budget. Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat that our public servants who served us daily were never mentioned in the budget. I want to say APNU-AFC is coming back. The people will bring us back. They will bring us back because what we have done for them in just a matter of 3.5 years is more than what the PPP did in 23 years. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable member. I now call on the Honorable Minister of Amerindian Affairs, Ms. Pauline Campbell Sukai. Honorable Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to make my contribution to the budget debate. Firstly, let me congratulate the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, and his team for the preparation work which produced the budget speech and the documents related to the expenditures. The budget theme, Mr. Speaker, a pathway to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience, adequately reflects Guyana's story. The legacy inherited from the APNU-AFC government after just 5 years, and the roadmap to be followed by the People's Progressive Party's civic government to right the wrongs and to place our country and its economy on a road to progress and prosperity for all of the people of Guyana, for one Guyana. Mr. Speaker, the wrongs committed by the APNU AFC government will be corrected by the PPP Civic government. We will address this in the recovery targets. The PPP Civic government inherited what can best be described as a disastrous situation, laced with increased corruption, discrimination, nepotism, neglect of the entire population, failure to deliver on their manifesto promises, failure to execute their 100-day campaign plans, and the so-called 10-point strategic plan for hinterland development. Mr. Speaker, more unashamedly, the attempt to steal the March 2020 elections, plunging Guyana into 5 months of threat to derail democracy and the numerous breaches of the Constitution after the no confidence motion and after the elections. The elections which the PPP Civic won fair and square. Mr. Speaker, the faith demonstrated by our people of Guyana, our country, and the leadership of the People's Progressive Party Civic, with the support from the smaller political parties and a significant bloc of the international community, including a core of young Guyanese men and women who lent full support to avoid the theft of the March 2nd election by the APNU, AFC politicians, leaders, and activists. Could this, Mr. Speaker, be the moral high ground they subscribe to themselves, and pretending to be the paragon of virtue while lecturing in this House about constitutionality, when it took the Caribbean Court of Justice to correct them, to remind them, and to bring home to them that they were in full breach of their own constitution, the Constitution of the Republic of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, many of whom now occupy the opposition seats in this honorable House, and what is funny, Mr. Speaker, is that they are so bold-faced, they continue to be oblivious of the fact that no one takes them seriously as they are seen as destabilizers to democracy and to development and to the people of this nation. The majority of the electorate, Mr. Speaker, has rejected the APNU AFC in the last election. Despite this, their agents continues to peddle the outdated trick and argument. They continue to use hate and racial overtones, sowing discord even in this honorable House and among the people of our nation, as every APNU AFC member of parliament has presented a hate and racially laced speech to this House. Mr. Speaker, this is shameful. Shameful of those who claim to be representing, as they say, close to 50% of the electorate. I now see, Mr. Speaker, why the electorate and the Guyanese nation will never take this group, this bunch, this team of APNU AFC politicians who sits in this honorable House seriously. Mr. Speaker, I want to get to the former President Granger strategic plan for hinterland development, because in this House over the last 4 days, well, today is the 4th day, we have heard how much the APNU AFC government has done for the people of this country. But in the strategic plan he outlined for hinterland development, I want to bring home to them that the APNU AFC-led Granger administration was a complete failure when it came to hinterland development. Mr. Speaker, the APNU-AFC legacy of non-performances in the sector of Amerindian development is well known across this country, and not only in the hinterland. The APNU-AFC coalition president each year since 2006 to 2019, the only public forum where you will cite the former president was at the NTC conference, where he regaled Amerindian leaders with a fantasy 10-point strategic plan for hinterland development and the lofty village improvement plans, which has never materialized and was never funded over the last 5 years. And yet in this House, Mr. Speaker, today, yesterday, and 2 days prior, I keep hearing about the VIPs. Mr. Speaker, can anyone here point us to any project or village improvement project over the last 5 years which was funded by the APNU-AFC government? There will be none, because the only funding the APNU-AFC administration provided to the Amerindian villages was the Presidential Grant Fund, established by the PPP civic government under the leadership of the now Vice President Bharat Jagdeo. Mr. Speaker, in that 5 years, they did not even take the time to increase the presidential grant. In fact, Mr. Speaker, they put on conditions and requirements for accessing the presidential grant, that only a mere 40% of the communities and villages across the hinterland were able to access those funds to stimulate some level of economic activities in those villages. That is a complete shameful act. Today, Mr. Speaker, one of the first things that we have done was to encourage the village councils to collaborate with their residents and villagers to come up with the proposals and access the presidential fund without conditions and requirements. Mr. Speaker, I can stand here today and say that in the last 3 months, almost all the villages in the hinterland, 213 Amerindian villages have accessed the Presidential Grant Fund. And in this 2021 budget, Mr. Speaker, we have 300 million Guyana dollars, where another 220 Amerindian village settlement and satellites will receive those grants to stimulate their economy. Mr. Speaker, to complement the Presidential Grant Fund, only this, in the recent period, we have now provided 1.73 billion Guyana dollars to support Amerindian communities, villages, and satellites to withstand and mitigate the harmful and negative impact from the pandemic which this country is suffering from. And I repeat, $1.73 billion, something which the APNU-AFC government failed to provide to stimulate the village economy, to create jobs, to provide investment fund for women, youths, and the village council to ensure that they too benefit from the resources and also the benefit from this country. Mr. Speaker, it is so a shame. It is a shameful act when members of this House from the opposite side, from the APNU-AFC side, could stand up in this House and say to us that they have traveled the length and breadth of this country in the hinterland, and that they have traveled so much, but they have traveled, wasted $1.6 billion in finances, and they have done nothing. What have you traveled for? Was it a vacation? Was it sightseeing? Was it for tourism? personal family affairs, tourism, and vacation, Mr. Speaker, they need to answer to this House. Because every single village you go to, Mr. Speaker, one of the most complaint you get is that within the last 5 years, they have not seen any minister coming to many communities in the villages. It was only in March, or close to March, the first 3 months of 2020, that we have seen ministers fanning out to the hinterland. We have had ministers going to Cato, ministers going to Paramakatoy. And Mr. Speaker, the results of the election was glaring. I don't know if they read or they understand the results, but what they took to the people in the last leg of their few months in office was cheap watches, sandals, cheap cologne, umbrellas, and jerseys. Amerindians are sensible Guyanese. Amerindians have been educated for 23 years under our government, and they can judge, and they have judged you well. And that is why those electorate who voted in Region 9, it became so hurtful to the APNU AFC that they grieved for the loss in Region 1, 9, and also in many of the communities which they have neglected. And therefore, the fallacy, the dream world, the fantasy world in which the members of parliament of APNU AFC, especially the Amerindian MPs on the APNU AFC side, is living. You're living in a fantasy world. You're fooling yourself. You cannot convince and influence the Amerindian population today, and therefore they have spoken with their vote. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, anyone who attempts to heckle what I've just said, they've lost in their own village. They've lost many of the villages in the region that they come from, including in Region 9. The MP who just spoke before me, he has lost that region because they have neglected the people. They have refused to listen to the people. They have refused to deliver development services, goods to the people, and the people have voted against them. Mr. Speaker, I want to take some time to talk and to respond to the CSO issue. Mr. Speaker, in the last budget debate in 2015 and also in 2020, this matter was put to rest. I stood here, Mr. Speaker, at that time and read the letter, which is still filed in the ministry, where the honorable member who is a minister today had a cabinet document which said that we should go ahead and pay. He also, Mr. Speaker, the honorable minister today has also, when he was a PS, wrote that the payment will be made. What we have seen is the incoming government refused to honor the cabinet decision, refused to honor the check, and they refused to renew the cycle of CSO to the program. Mr. Speaker, and they speak about haste. They have claimed that 2,500 businesses and enterprise has been created. It is documented, Mr. Speaker, as such. But when you go to the communities, you cannot even find more than one, or you find zero, nothing. And I'll follow the footsteps of my honorable member who said that there is nothing, and he spelled the word Nothing. There's no program. How many business and enterprise exist in Kako? How many in Waramadong? How many in Warwater? How many at Keto? How many at Kaibarupai? How many in Tusining? How many in Shulinab? Mr. Speaker, they can take their time in opposition now and go with lenses or microscope to examine where those phantom enterprises and business exist. Mr. Speaker, that is the legacy of Hayes. And Mr. Speaker, they claim that we have not renewed the Hayes program, but there is also correspondence from the then minister who no longer sits in this house, the Honorable Sidney Alicock, when he was minister, writing to the Minister of Finance, stating that in 2019, there was no more money to address the Hayes program, and he had to disconnect all the staff that were in the region and the entire program, and that he was going to keep 4 staff to ensure that they tie up the documentation for that program. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what occurred. They have all manner of data in the report, but are non-existent in the field. Legacy. Mr. Speaker, I heard here the honorable members talking about $10,000 for the children, and that how the PPP civic government promised $50,000 in 2020. Mr. Speaker, I want to recall and to remind this House, it was the APNU AFC government who removed the $10,000 because we gave cash grant to the children. It is the PPP civic government who is back in office and who will restart the program with $15,000 per child. Mr. Speaker, and for the want of understanding of our commitment and promises to the children of this nation, before the end of our term, every child will receive $50,000. Mr. Speaker, the school uniform program. I'm speaking about these, Mr. Speaker, because these are programs and measures that directly impact on the children of the hinterland. Mr. Speaker, when we left office, we had $2,400 to provide 1 school uniform per child for the hinterland. Mr. Speaker, the government found no interest in increasing it. It was the PPP civic government, when we came back in office in the last 3 months, that we have in the last emergency budget, that we increased it to $4,000 per child. And we have delivered already, Mr. Speaker. Within the first 3 months of our office, we delivered to every single hinterland student $4,000 for their school uniform assistance. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the CSO program. We have stood true to our word to the youths of this country. We have reinstated, as soon as we came into office, the CSO program. And Mr. Speaker, someone here articulated how much grateful the communities are to have the CSO program back. Mr. Speaker, they talk about training for the young people. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the training in the first component, when we were in office between 2013 to 2015, it was in the concept, but it was this Banbury government. In this year, Mr. Speaker, the training component of the CSO program has been budgeted. And Mr. Speaker, $820 million is going towards building capacity and empowering Amerindian youths under the CSO program. Mr. Speaker, that is what you call interest in youths. That is what you call delivering on our commitment to young people. And look around our parliament and examine our cabinet. 90% or 99% of our members are young, youthful Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, getting back again to the Granger-led administration strategic plan for hinterland development. One of it was the Hinterland Energy Development Program. Mr. Speaker, this is a failure. You go around the communities and the villages, there's no hinterland energy development program. What you will find is a few scattered, incomplete installation of standalone solar units, they call it. You go to St. Monica, the battery panel is there. The solar panels are scattered in different buildings. Go to Kabakaburi, it's the same thing. Go to Kako, it's the same thing. Go to Monkey Mountain, it is the same thing. You see all these panels piled in buildings, incomplete, not installed. Mr. Speaker, they even announced in this House in 2015 that they have established a solar farm in Mykobi. It is in the records, it is in the Hansard. But I took the time, like my honorable member, Yvonne Pearson, we went to Mykobi looking for the established solar farm. What did we find? Nothing. It's the same story like the smart classrooms we have just heard. Nothing. N-O-T-H-I-N-G. Nothing. Mr. Speaker, I want to recall of the 6,000 panels procured under the PPP civic government when we left office, which was misdirected to State House and to the office of the presidency, instead to the Amerindian communities, to the hinterland communities, and to the remote riverine communities. That was the purpose for acquiring 6,000 additional solar panels to be given to those who needed it. But they took it all for themselves. Mr. Speaker, I want to announce here today that our government in this year will be delivering 35,000 household solar units across the hinterlands and remote communities. And before the end of the year, we will deliver on this. Mr. Speaker, that is what you call delivering your commitments to the people, because that is a manifesto promise that we will enhance and increase the opportunity for Amerindians and hinterland residents to receive solar power in their homes. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the Hinterland Indigenous Land Commission, another strategic plan by the APNU AFC Granger-led administration, which was a total failure. Total to the extent that even the Amerindian groups and institutions, including the NTC, objected to it, because the objective of that commission was to review and to revise lands provided to Amerindians under the PPP civic government. Mr. Speaker, it was a callous attempt to take away lands from Amerindians. And we have seen the results. Because they did not get their own way, the monies that were left to address land titling and demarcation, $10.7 million was only spent on salaries, daily subsistence, and allowances for a team that knew not how to work. They put the project on pause. But I want to say to this House, despite they have spent $3 million and more on salaries, allowances, and subsistence allowances, we will take the remaining $6 million and address the Amerindian land titling project once again. We have 1 year, Mr. Speaker, to complete the targeted number of titling and demarcation, something which was not done in 5 years by the APNU AFC. I would like the honorable member from Region 9, MP, geographical MP on the APNU AFC side to take that back to the people. Let them listen now. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about some other matters as it relates to indigenous development. This year, Mr. Speaker, we will be training CSOs, and I want to lay this in the record. 174 young CSOs will be trained in computer literacy. We have already completed training of 57 in the first 3 months of our government. We will train 220 young male and female CSOs in, Mr. Speaker, the installation of solar panels and also in maintenance of other infrastructure in their communities. Mr. Speaker, we will also train 220 drivers because, Mr. Speaker, our government has been the forerunner in revolutionizing transport systems in the hinterland. Under the last 5 years, the transport or the mode of transport, the vehicles, the tractors, the ATVs was left without maintenance. Amerindian villages in Region 8, all their ATV were done by 2017 and 2018. When they approached the MOIPA, you know, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, for support, they even raised it at the NTCs for the last 3 NTCs held under the MOIPA, asking the government of that day, of the day then, to help them to get those vehicles back on track. You know what they did? They said, no, we are not going to do it. Mr. Speaker, it saddens us to see Chiang Mau Tushao walking to RDC meeting on the APNU AFC tenure, taking 6 hours to get from Chiang Mau to Kato. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you here today that we are going to replenish ATVs in Region 8, and we are going to assist them in repairing all those that are done so that they can have at least one single mode of transportation to assist them to administer their village. Mr. Speaker, the member on the other side of the divide, the other side in the opposition, the APNU AFC, can do well to begin to conduct herself and do the people's job, to get out there and represent the people, and not to take sweets and throw it up in the air when she visits her community and ask them to catch. One resident had to ups, or as they say in Creole language, ups the then opposition MP that our children are not dogs, so don't throw the sweets up in the air. Put them in a line and give the sweets in their hands. We have the video, Mr. Speaker. What a shame. It is not a joke, it's an I pass to the indigenous children of our country. Mr. Speaker, they speak about ICT hubs and how much they have done for the hinterland as respect to the ICT program. Mr. Speaker, if they had done and the work was done successfully, 72, as they claim, 72 villages, village children would have been logged in to the learning channel. Today, Mr. Speaker, when they lashed their chest in 2015 and saying, one minister actually practically got up in the House, in Parliament, and said when they arrive in Upakari, they took their phone out when they arrived under the mango tree, and they were able to connect to the internet, and they downloaded Animal Kingdom, some fancy thing, and all the children gathered. Mr. Speaker, we would like to see all the children gathered around an internet hub, logged into the learning channel. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what this government will do.
Honorable
The
Minister,
PPP
before you
civic
can tell
government
me,
will do.
you have to get an extension.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for the honourable member to be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Teixeira. Honorable Minister Sukai, you may continue to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party Civic will restart the ICT program, and we will, in 2 years, install 200 systems for Amerindian and hinterland communities. We are going to deliver. In fact, in the last 3 months, we have already transported more than 10 batch of equipment for installation in Region 9. Mr. Speaker, it is a saddened time when a government can waste taxpayers' money because 100 ICT hub facility was constructed and furnished, and they abandoned it. And let's talk about health care services and entitlement. You, Mr. Speaker, the other side had a geriatric parliament and cabinet and spent millions, going into billions, in removing heart, looking after kneecaps, taking out stones, and going all over in Ireland to do exactly what they're accusing us to do. Mr. Speaker, let's get it straight. They had to lift you, Mr. Speaker, honorable member, bring them into parliament when you yourself was being serviced, Mr. Speaker, honorable member, Mr. Speaker, was spending taxpayers' money to correct the problems she had. It's nice to get personal on this side with us, but it's never nice to get personal when we get personal on the other side. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member spoke about the Green Institute. Mr. Speaker, millions were spent on the Green Institute, commissioned and boasted about in the newspaper. Mr. Speaker, on investigation this year, the Green Institute is but a shell. There's nothing there. So how can this government up and start? We have to now examine that project and make provision for it for the future. Shameful. They went there bubbling with ribbons and balloons, cutting, but there's nothing, a bare shell. Shame on you. Shame on you. Hinterland Poverty Program was another Granger-led administration promise to the hinterland. Mr. Speaker, you're talking about poverty reduction. Under the AFC, APNU government, there was no support for women and enterprise. None whatsoever, Mr. Speaker, in the hinterland. Mr. Speaker, tell me one project in the hinterland which the APNU, AFC government did for women. What they've done is to go and list and record the PPP civic government projects that existed there when they took office. Mr. Speaker, let us talk about how they treated our youths, our women, and the hinterland. Mr. Speaker, they put VAT on airfare. They put VAT on freight. And then in 2015, as an election gimmick, they said in the parliament then that they're going to remove it, but they never removed it. It is this government that has made amends to the people of the hinterland, and we've removed that. Mr. Speaker, that is what we call our commitment to the people. We are delivering on every promise and commitment to the nation. Mr. Speaker, as we talk about support for hinterland riverine communities, this year's, Mr. Speaker, we will once more budget, and we budgeted for outboard engines, $42 million in outboard engines, boat and engines, something never heard of under the APNU AFC. We have budgeted for agricultural support. And Mr. Speaker, agricultural support, we will deliver very shortly 112 tractors to Amerindian communities. And in 2021 budget, we have made provision to procure 112 plow and harrow to enhance the agricultural production of the hinterland and the Amerindian communities. The tractors, Mr. Speaker, will support transportation service. It will also enhance the forestry sector and, of course, agri. And that is a commitment we have made once more. Every single village you go,
now, Honorable Minister.
Every single village you go to, Mr. Speaker, the farmers are asking for chemicals to fight Akushi ants. In the last 5 years, they have not delivered. Honorable Member Don Hastings will remember that the PPP Civic led teams of spraying teams to control Akushi ants in Region 7. We provided fast stack and Akushi ants bait across Region 1, 9, 7, 10, etc. Mr. Speaker, they have done nothing in the last 5 years to enhance food security, livelihood options, and economic activities in the hinterland. In fact, look at their record on the performance. Rigging,
Thank you,
bullying, etc. Mr. Speaker, and thank you, and that is why we have seen that they will remain on the opposite side for a long, long time.
Honorable Member, Mr. Dinesh Jaiprashad, you may proceed with your presentation.
Pandit ready to go. Mr. Speaker, it's an honor and privilege for me to represent AP and UAFC in this honorable house. Before I proceed with my presentation, I wish to rebuke some of the points that were made by the Honorable Minister Pauline Sukai. I wish to say that probably the Honorable Minister was not around for the past 5 years. That is why she did not make note and comprehend the various activities that were done in all the various Amerindian communities across the country. I wish to bring to the honorable attention of the Honorable Minister that in Region 6, my brothers and sisters in our Oriala were able to connect with the world via internet. A program that was done by AP and UAFC. I wish to say to the Honorable Minister, she just left, but the message will be related to her, that in every Amerindian community of this country, the 5 Bs initiative were implemented. We have given, the AP and UAFC government has given boats and buses and bicycles to all the Amerindian communities. This AP and UAFC government has given to our hinterland communities water ambulance, water taxi, something that they were badly in need of over 23 years. I wish to also make it clear to the Honorable Minister that APNU-AFC provide internet services in 5 years, more than what the PPP has done in 23 years. The Honorable Minister made mention that they will train some CSOs and other Amerindian youths. But this government closed a college which trained a lot of Amerindian youths coming out from the interior. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to the Honorable Sports Minister, Mr. Ramson. He was very much vocal in presenting everything other than sports. He pondered a lot, the Honorable Minister pondered a lot on race. But I have here in my hand, Mr. Speaker, that another black young lady service was terminated today. I wish to say to the Honorable Minister that in his presentation, he said that James Bond and Malaika Ramsey should have been given position. But in my hands, a termination letter was given to Malaika Ramsey. Shame. Honorable brothers and sisters of this House, Mr. Speaker, as I read the budget speech, and while I was listening to the Honorable Minister, it dawns upon that this theme for this budget is very much out of tune with what is happening in Guyana at the moment. The theme for this budget is not making sense to the man in poverty at the moment. We have observed that since August 2020, the plight of the poor people is increasing. And to date, this government is not doing anything that will put more money in the hands of the poor people. A pathway to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. This language is well crafted, Mr. Speaker, but just a few percent of Guyanese will benefit from this budget. The team is well crafted to show the world that we are doing things, but in reality, only a few of their supporters will benefit. Mr. Speaker, page 5 of the budget speech, and I quote, "Ensure we recover as a country from both 2020 and from the last 5 years of trauma." This is a big untruth. How can the Honorable Minister of Finance, Senior Minister, say to us that we are recovering from trauma under the past 5 years? And he is fully aware that the APNU-AFC government moved the salary from 39,000 to 70,000. What is the trauma there, Mr. Speaker? Where is the trauma, Mr. Speaker? In a country where the tax threshold was moved to 65,000. A country under trauma, Mr. Speaker, will not move out from being blacklisted for drugs, crime, and extrajudicial killing to a safe place. A safe place is not trauma, Mr. Speaker. A country under trauma, Mr. Speaker, will not significantly reduce suicide, which was the highest rate in 2014 in the world. The PPP knew, Mr. Speaker, who were killing themselves. But nothing was put in place to help those brothers and sisters. It was the APNUAFC who brought down the suicide rate in this country. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? The PPP is bent on seeing development and progress, and they are not, willing to acknowledge that things were done. Mr. Speaker, a country experiencing trauma will not provide facilities for school children. History will hold us accountable that for all 10 regions, there has been an improvement in performance from attendance to grade 2, 4, 6, 9, and 11 because of the initiative of APNUAFC. A country in trauma, Mr. Speaker, will not make roads for Guyanese brothers and sisters who have never seen road in their life. And I wish to call upon the Honorable Minister Pauline Sukai to go and check the Amerindian communities, visit Region 1, so that she will be able to understand. Good. Mr. Speaker, this budget is not for the poor people of this country. It will give the ordinary people help, and some cronies will do well. I turn my attention now to East Berbice Quarantine. I am happy to represent the people of East Berbice Quarantine, and I bring some of their concern as it relates to what is happening in the country at the moment. COVID, Mr. Speaker. The issue of COVID in East Berbice Quarantine is getting from bad to worse. We know that our borders, east, west, north, and south, are very much porous. And this government don't have a plan to tackle the movement of people in and out of Guyana. We observed what happened a few weeks ago, whereby 3 Guyanese came via backtrack mode. And 2 were found dead, 1 still missing. This is clearly indicating to us that the Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Minister, does not have a plan to deal with our border and territorial strengthening issues. What is the COVID plan for Barbician, Mr. Speaker? When will the people receive the 25,000 per month, like what is happening in other countries? Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance indicated that United States and Euro, Canada, and other countries have assisted citizens with relief. But this government has not been doing anything much to assist the brothers and sisters of Guyana. They have given them 25,000 and done with it. Mr. Speaker, the curfew situation in Guyana is very much sickening. We know that we are in a pandemic, and we know that alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and suicide are related. Yet, this government moved the curfew from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. to facilitate sporting activities. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to the public service. This is a gross and blatant disrespect, Mr. Speaker, to the taxpayers of this country. This government needs to ensure that all Guyanese pay their appropriate taxes. Don't worry with the 10 million fraud that was made mention by some senior PPP officials. We have had 6 billion in the same line item in the last budget. And what did public servants receive? 25,000. Are we to assume that the 10 billion will give them a 30 bonus? Mr. Speaker, our nurses, policemen, firemen, soldiers, and other frontline workers were on duty all day, every day. And this government did not give them a 10%, nor 100%, which we asked for, 100,000, which we asked for. Minister of Finance, the Honorable Minister, please ensure that the frontline workers receive 100,000 for last year and 100,000 for 2021. Because we have set a legacy, Mr. Speaker. The Guyanese people will know that we have given them 77% increase in 5 years. Education, Mr. Speaker. The APNU-AFC established the Bertram Collins College to train young people to serve the public service. The APNU government trained more than 250 young people. And this government, as soon as they came into office, closed this college. What a shame. We are talking about education. We are talking about development. We are talking about taking our young people out of poverty, and we close the college that trained them so that they will work and serve the public system. If we, Mr. Speaker, if there was an issue with the college, then it could have been rectified. If there was a situation with the college, then stakeholders could have put systems in place and ensure that it is being expanded to facilitate more of our young people. Mr. Speaker, let me remind the Guyanese people that the PPP government put fee on university education. And during the campaign prior to 2020 election, it was on the lampposts everywhere, free education after. But, Mr. Speaker, we were told that it will not be free education at the University of Guyana. It will be online courses. Many of us have reservation on online courses because we know what can happen there. We are asking that let the government of the day provide free education from nursery to university so that the poor people of this country can be able to benefit and have a proper education. Mr. Speaker, agriculture. The Honorable Minister made mention on page 8 of the budget speech. Agriculture, forestry, fishing sector is estimated to have grown by 4.1%. And all the members of the government, none of them have indicated that this growth occurred during APNU-AFC time. Probably they were ashamed to say it directly, but it was. If agriculture was not there as a priority for APNU-AFC, how the rights sector recorded the highest growth in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister made mention that 6 more drying facilities, paddy drying facilities, will be constructed in strategic location in Region 2, 3, 5, and 6. Let me remind the Guyanese people that in Region 6, we have some paddy drying facilities that are not being utilized by the rice farmers since this government came into office in August. 2015
Thank you,
to 20...
Honorable Member. We need to get an extension for you to remind us of more.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. I do move that the Honourable Member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Member Jones. Honourable Member, proceed.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Paddy drying floor across the Region 6. 2015 to 2019, rice farmers utilized the drying facilities. This reduced the road fatalities in the quarantine. Upon installment in 2020, by the PPP administration, we are back to square one, where the public road is being used for paddy drying. Based on investigation, Mr. Speaker, one drying facilities was built in a private land in quarantine. And the individual circled the facility. And, Mr. Speaker, are we going to build more of these paddy drying facilities in East Berbice quarantine and leave it there like white elephant? Or are we going to ensure that we observe proper procedure in terms of reducing casualty on the quarantine highway by ensuring that rice farmers use the facility at Lesbiolian and the drying facilities along the coast? Housing, Mr. Speaker. I wish to draw the attention of the Honorable House on the issue of housing. Every speaker from the PPP side, honorable members, made mention about the 50,000 house lots. It seems as if though the house lot issue is the major thing for the PPP. But let me bring some light to the Guyanese people that 20 years now. I don't have one. I applied during the PPP time, I never get it. Mr. Speaker, the 77 housing scheme that is more than 15 years old is yet to be filled. The 76 housing scheme is yet to be filled. Broomfield is in a deep mess. 10, Block 4, deep mess, more than 15 years old. Mr. Anand, you live right there. You buy a house there, you know what I'm talking about. Next to the honorable member, there's a lot there. There's a lot there for sale, 10 million for it. So we see what is happening. Friends and associates are giving these lands, and after 10, 15 years, when the time passes, it is being for sale, 10 million prime road lots. Right? Mr. Speaker, Area R, Angoville, Babujan, still. Angoville, Bangladesh, Hampshire South, Ordnance Fort Lands, Canefield New Area, Adelphi Scheme, Glasgow Housing Scheme. All these programs, all these housing areas are yet to be filled, and we're still giving the people 50,000 house lots. We are giving them 50,000 house lots in a pandemic. People are without jobs. This government has sent home 1,500 persons, and you are giving them a house lot to build what? Where will they have the money from? How they will build it? Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to the issue of water tariff. It is very, very important that I bring to the Honorable House that this government will be reducing the Guyanese people a very large sum of money, $100. Approximately $100 a month. And on an average, the Guyanese people pays $2,000 a month on water. This government reduced the water tariff 5%. Basically, 5% of 2,000, you are giving the people 5 mints, 5 sweetie a month, and you call that you care. The Honorable Minister put it on a big chunk, billions. So it sounds, very flowery, very good. But it's just $100 per household, and that you are here to talk about. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I wish to bring something of great importance to the people of Berbice and the people of Guyana. Berbice River Bridge. When this government constructed the Berbice River Bridge, the price was the second highest around the world, $2,200 for a car. The people plead with the PPP government to reduce that fare, but it was in the pipeline for the PPP to double it. Thanks to AP and new AFC government, The fare was removed from 2,200 to 1,900. Every time we cross that Burbage Bridge, the government, 2015 to 2020, pays $300 for every vehicle, cars and minibuses. We are in a pandemic, and according to the Ministry of Health regulation, vehicles had to drive at reduced capacity. When the association, the Hire Car Association and the Minibus Association asked the government, the PPP government, from August, reduce the fare of the bridge to facilitate us, they said, no, you must pay the 1,900. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say that if the Honorable Minister of Finance can state to the Guyanese people that he will include at least a 10% or 100,000 for public servant and frontline workers, if he will provide more services to the poor people, then we will be able to support it. If not, we are not. Thank you very much.
I now call on the Honorable Member, Mr. Faisal Jafar Ali. Honorable Member, you may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support Budget 2021 as presented by the Honorable Senior Minister with responsibility with Finance, Dr. Ashley Singh. Allow me, on behalf of the people of Region 5, to congratulate and applaud the Honorable Senior Minister, Dr. Ashley Singh, and staff of the Ministry of Finance for a well-crafted budget. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, every single Guyanese, be the public servants, the teachers, the rice farmers, sugar workers, taxi drivers, nurses, minibus operators, the fisher folk, the pensioners, and yes, even the school children, the private sector and the manufacturing sector will all benefit from Budget 2021. Mr. Speaker, every region, every community, whether you live in Linden in Region 10, or Karasaba in Region 9, or you live in Maracaba in Region 5, or Port Mort in Region 6, every single community will see some sort of infrastructure development in Budget 2021. Mr. Speaker, with the return to office of the PPPC government led by Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, we have seen great expansion in the business community of Region 5, which was dormant and closing during the 5 years of the coalition government. Mr. Speaker, the commercial business in Region 5 is expanded. New business are going up every day since the PPP returned to office. The construction industry in Region 5 is booming. Agriculture development, there's a demand for land in Region 5 because of the program set out by this PPP government as it relates to agriculture. Services are improving and spreading across Region 5. Mr. Speaker, Region 5 has suffered significantly at the hands of the coalition government. We have seen political discrimination in every community that the coalition feel they did not receive support. And Mr. Speaker, I want to share a few of these communities with you. Mr. Speaker, let us look at one NDC, the Blaemont Gilderland NDC. This NDC consists of 4 communities: Ithaca, Zerdenhoop, Blaemont, Shieldstone. Mr. Speaker, for 5 years, under the PNC rule, because the coalition is now dead, under the PNC rule, not a single infrastructure work was done in Shieldstone, in Blaymont, in Zordenhoop. Not a single infrastructure work was done in 5 years. And yet, they are telling us they have done work across this country. But look what they did to Ithaca. Every single road was paved. Street lights in every corner. Street lights in every corner. The community ground was upgraded. Mr. Speaker, the people of Ithaca deserve to have those things. Similarly, the people of Blaymont, the people of Zordenhoop, and the people of Shieldstone deserve the same treatment. The same treatment. Mr. Speaker, the first week that this de facto government came to office in 2015, by means of fake statement of poll in 2015, they took away the street lights in many communities. Blaymont, Shieldstone, Cotton Tree, Woodley Park, Bad Settlement, Bushlot. Shame, Mr. Speaker. Shame, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to draw the comparison. Recently, the Ministry of Local Government, using subvention, bought hundreds of community street lights for Region 5. I know how it was distributed equally across the 10 NDC, across the NDC. That is how we operate, because we believe that we are a government for all the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, in number 40, 41, and 42, small rice farmers, Afro-Guyanese, who were given lease under President Donald Ramatar. When they came to office in 2015, they took these small rice farmers to court. These farmers sought attention with the then President David Granger. They were refused entry to the office of the President. They sought audience with the then Minister of State, now the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. He said he was too busy. Mr. Speaker, these Afro-Guyanese small rice farmers came to us, and we made a representation through the Honorable Anil Nandalal. We took them to the government, the court of the day then, and we were able to restore what is rightfully theirs, rice land. So whether we were concerned about people, Mr. Speaker, in the community of Zordenhoop, 27 families for 5 years has been pleading with the coalition government for electricity. In this period of pandemic, electricity is important. And instead of assisting these people to give them electricity, they were served with eviction. And honorable members, Mr. Speaker, these people have leased and transported the land. And the government, the coalition government, served them eviction. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report, with the intervention of the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development and the Ministry of Public Works, work has already commenced to ensure these 27 families receive electricity. That is how we operate. That is how we operate. Mr. Speaker, I have listened to some of the opposition, the honorable members of parliament, and they're using words like democracy. They're using words like good governance. My God, and accountability and honesty. Look at your track record. Look at your track record. Mr. Speaker, they're talking about democracy. Leading up to the 2020 election, they made an attempt to disenfranchise 20,000 residents of Region 5. 20,000 residents from Region 5 stating that these people are not alive. 20,000 in one community of Maracaibo. Maracaibo has a total of 527 on the voters list. They said 520 does not exist. They died. They died. Just you can imagine how these people operate. They went to Maikoni Creek, places like Garden Table, places like Governor Light, Fort Savannah, and they tried to disenfranchise. Thanks to the PPP, we stood by those people and ensured that their constitutional right to vote was intact. Mr. Speaker, they're talking about corruption. Mr. Speaker, there are shady deals in a number of government agencies under the coalition, the airport, MARDS, the transport on the harbor, the sea defense, and we can go on. And we can go on. Shady deals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the community of Maracaibo, when our presidential candidate went there, before he became the president, the people expressed in real disgust how they were marginalized, how they were discriminated against by the AFP&U, the PNC government. We made a commitment there and then that when we take office, we will ensure that community receive equal benefits like any other community across this region. Mr. Speaker, when the APNU government was in office, electricity was limping at 1 hour a day. I'm pleased to say, with a short period of time that the PPP in office, Maracaibo is receiving electricity 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. The water supply was limping. My colleague, the Honorable Susan Rodriguez, we went in there and we made a commitment. They enjoy potable water in full supply. Expansion of the health center, expansion of the primary school. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to report that a hellboat is on its way to Maracaibo. A hellboat is on the way to Maracaibo. Mr. Speaker, Mahaika Borbis is perhaps one of the largest agriculture area in our country, with more than 96,000 acres under rice cultivation, 13,000 acres under sugar cultivation, 5,000 acres under cattle pasture, 2,000 acres under cash crop, directly employing a large percentage of the residents in Region 5 in the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, in 5 years, Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC government have destroyed a viable and productive sector. They deliberately allow the drainage and irrigation network to collapse, make the farm to market road impossible. If that was not enough, Mr. Speaker, they raised DNI and land charges between 300 and 700% without any consultation with the farmers. The de facto APNU government stayed true to their colors, true dictators. With the coming to office, Mr. Speaker, of Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali's PBC government, we immediately reverse the harsh and unconscionable decision. Mr. Speaker, what we have achieved in 5 months the AP&U administration did not achieve in 5 years. In five short months, what this government have done for the people of Region 5, you have not done in 5 years. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture, through the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Zulfikar Mustafa, visit that community in the MMA ADA area, and he immediately pronounced the reversal of those highest charges. Land rental went back to $3,500 from $15,000. You know what that would mean, honorable members? $1.5 billion will remain in the pockets of the farmers. $1.5 billion will remain in the pocket of the farmers. And Mr. Speaker, I must confess, that is one of our manifesto promises fulfilled. Mr. Speaker, in addition of reversing the unconscionable rise in land and D&I charges, Mr. Speaker, we have removed VAT on fertilizer, pesticides, weedicides, agriculture machinery, and equipment, which will allow more disposable income into the pockets of our farmers. Mr. Speaker, the visionary leadership of the AP&U AFC administration. Less than 3 months of coming to office, Mr. Speaker, the ministry, the PPP administration, the Ministry of Agriculture, through MMA, ADA, were able to create and maintain and clean 60 miles of secondary canals. 60 miles in less than 3 months. And were able to grade and shape 200 miles of road, build 6 bridges and 3 sloughs. This reality came about because the Honorable Minister visited the community. He was not like Noel Holder. When he leaves to go to Region 5, he stay at Tuts. That's all. That's the farthest he go, Tuts. But the Minister of Agriculture went down to the back dam, interacted with the farmers, listened to the farmers, and made on-the-spot decision. Mr. Speaker, with this intervention, it means that farmers will save significantly. It will reduce the time farmers will take to go to their farm. Farmers normally leave during the collation period at 4 o'clock, and they reach their farm at 7 o'clock. Now they can leave at 6 and reach at 7, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recently a contract was signed for $327 million for the construction of a concrete road at MMAIR 3 area. This initiative, Mr. Speaker, will open up 30,000 acres of land.
To continue with that initiative, you'll need some time.
2,000 farmers, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, honorable member needs 5 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Member Mr. Jafar Ali, you may continue to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, in the area of housing, Mr. Speaker, in 5 years, not a single house lot was developed by the AP&U AFC. What was a house lot? The thousands of house lots that are in Region 5 in housing scheme like Bagshak housing scheme, Zordamoop housing scheme, Block D housing scheme, Hope housing scheme, Experiment housing scheme, Bath housing scheme, Bushlot New Era housing scheme, Waterloo housing scheme were all developed under PPP government. Go to those communities, they're all occupied. Young teachers, young public servants, young professionals are occupying those areas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the area of education, I'm proud to say, under the PPP government led by Honorable Minister Priya Manichan, we have acquired universal education at the primary level. At the primary level, And very shortly, we will also achieve universal education at the secondary level. Mr. Speaker, during this period of pandemic, we have ensured that all of our schools are well equipped so as with the various protocol as it relates to the COVID pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, Mr. Speaker, unlike our colleagues in the APNU, AFC, our work program, every single community, every single NDC will benefit across the region. Every single NDC, whether it's Hamlet's Chance in Myconi Branch Road, whether it's Seafield Tempe, Bath Waterloo, Zizite, Rosegnol, all will benefit through the 2021 program. You know why? Because the Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, the Honorable Nigel Darmalal, has been going across and he sees what is happening. Mr. Speaker, in 5 years, many communities have not seen a minister of your government, have not seen a minister of your government. In less than 5 months, Mr. Speaker, Region 5 has had 62 ministerial visits across every community in Region 5. Mr. Speaker, in the Duhoop, Big Balbu area, no minister ever visited there. In less than 5 months, we had a number of ministers, Minister Zulfikar Mustafa, Minister Priya Manichan, Minister Juan Etil, Minister Nigel Darmalal, Minister Susan Rogers, Minister Colin Cole, Minister Gail Teixeira, Minister Sonia, all our ministers visit. Our visit is not mere visit, it's serious business. Serious business. When the honorable minister goes in this community, they discuss, they interact, they listen to the communities, and they are able to develop based on these visits. Based on these visits, honorable members, that area will see electricity from number 10 to Big Balbu. 90% of the infrastructure work already completed. Drainage and irrigation, the honorable minister instructed that a machine should remain in that area. The honorable minister Priya Manichan, when you want to see commitment from an education minister, look at Priya Manichan, the honorable member. I have seen with my own eyes the honorable minister tracking between mud and slush, jumping on a boat to ensure that our children get their worksheet. Mr. Speaker, this is how we operated. Mr. Speaker, in sports, in less than 3 months, the honorable minister went to Region 5 and instructed that the number of grounds must be upgraded. Fairfield, Bath Settlement, D. Edward, Cotton Tree, and it makes sporting facilities available. Mr. Speaker, I'm certain with Budget 2021, much more will come to Region 5. Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with my colleagues on the other side of the House. Let's join this process of development. Let us work together for the betterment of our country and our people. Mr. Speaker, it's given me great honor to commend and support Budget 2021 as presented by the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Just want to remind the members of the Business Subcommittee, we will meet at 5 p.m. in the Dome. Honorable members, this is a good time to take the suspension.
We are a peaceful people. Struggle is with struggle, and we don't